He's got my
Bring the Selectmen's meeting for March 10th, 2014 to order. First order of business is approve the minutes from the previous meeting.
I have a question, Nancy.
Yes.
Over here under citizens, Lenny was then given the floor for the second time to finish her comments on Nancy's integrity and the amount of time used from taxpayers' money researching constant complaints. And then I've had, for 2 weeks now, I've had the question haunting me that you spent 14 hours researching. Was that right?
Yes.
Why?
Because of a complaint that was filed with the district attorney's office.
Not district attorney.
I mean, Attorney General, I'm sorry, Attorney General's office.
And it took 14 hours to research that?
From start to finish. It started in October, and it took 14 hours.
I guess I'm still puzzled. Why would it take that long?
I mailed you a copy of the letter regarding the complaint.
Yeah.
And there were hours spent researching to see if the rec committee was a town committee. Hours spent looking for a passbook and for statements that finally the passbook was located. The statements never did exist. So just hours and hours of research, correspondence. The complaint with the Attorney General's office took quite a bit of time. It involved a lot of phone calls to different people. I mean, I received one call, it was the last day of the fiscal year at 3:30 in the afternoon. So trying to, it took a lot of time to do all of this research and get back to her and back and forth.
Have you people read the minutes? I make the motion we accept the minutes as read.
I'll second the motion. Been moved and seconded to accept the minutes as read. All those in favor? 2 in favor? 2 in favor? 1 opposed? Or are you opposed?
No, I just had a question. Well, Lenny read her statement from a piece of paper and was wondering why it wasn't in here.
Because she didn't turn it in.
Can we have a copy of that?
It didn't get submitted in.
Didn't get submitted. Can we get a copy of that?
That was just notes to myself.
Notes to yourself? It says down here when he was given the floor to finish her comments on Nancy's integrity, the amount of time used from taxpayers' money researching constant complaints. That's the only complaint that I've heard.
That's the only complaint that was brought to your attention
So how
to
come
this
if
magnitude.
there's complaints,
We had
how come we're not hearing them?
There's maybe complaints is the incorrect word. I should correct that word then. But there are requests, should be the word.
Constant requests.
Yes. So that word can,
From the same person?
some from different.
Okay. Go ahead.
So change that word to complaint to request, if you would please.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to accept the minutes as read, I guess with that one change. All those in favor? 3 in favor, none opposed. Okay, financials, before the warrant, checkbook had $178,447.08. Warrant, $53,224.69. Payroll warrant of $758.12. Balance after those after the warrant and the payroll warrant, $124,464.27. Old business, planning board rotation.
That's something that before town meeting would need to be considered. If it passes to go to the 3, the woman from MMA said we didn't need to include the 2 alternates because the bylaws already state 2 alternates. So that phrasing did not need to be changed. Of course, she's under the assumption that we currently have a steady rotation as we're supposed to have, and we don't. So that's something that at some point in time needs to be started so that, and her feeling was that the rotation, if approved, the rotation, the person that was supposed to be filled, the position that should be filled this year, just wouldn't get filled, and it would work that way. But since that's not how it's happening, and we currently have 5 members, somebody needs to decide how that process is going to work. Does that make sense?
I
Do you have any thoughts on that, Bill?
Well, they always appointed them, and then all of a sudden here, a year or so ago, they come in to town meeting and they said, we're gonna elect you. And they elected 5 members. And they didn't take no, paperwork or anything about it, so. And really, you don't need 5, 3 is sufficient. But you can have 5 if you want, I don't care how you do it. But I think you've got to start somewhere, because this, have them all go up the same year, it's just a nuisance for every town meeting. Whether you go 3 or 5.
And if that is approved, you can't start that immediately. It has to be, there's a 90-day, usually things that have happened, such as the road commissioner's position last year, went from 1 to 3. It was decided just to wait until the next town meeting. But you do have a 90-day period for a change like that before you can act, if the town approves it. So that's something else that will have to be taken into consideration.
And would you have the opportunity under that article to establish how that rotation would be set up?
Well, it's already supposed to be in place. So that's why in that article it really isn't.
Right.
So
it should be dealt with.
it's, yes. So we don't just continue to have this problem. Charlie Robbins has said he's willing
Step
to
down.
step down. He's retiring, and he's willing to step down and be the first person. So that person, there's one person that can come down, but then there'll have to be somebody else. Between now and Tuesday, Tuesday's town meeting, so. And actually, no, you have longer than that, because we have to wait to act on that for the 90 days anyway, so if the town decides that's how they want to go, I guess then you have time
Get it squared away.
to figure that out after that.
What does the article specifically say in the town law? Is that
Well, you will just.
You better wait 90 days to change that around, and that's why we wait for another year, vote and do it this year, and keep it the way it is for another year. And next year, have it voted to.
I think that's what we'll have to vote on to do it this year, to do it next year. Vote on it.
Yeah,
this
I
year,
mean, do it, yeah. That's what I'm saying. No need to have a special town meeting or anything like that, something like that.
In fact, the bylaws, 2 and this is what she sent back. To see if the town will vote to decrease the size of the elected planning board from 5 members to 3, with the reduction being accomplished over the next 2 years by phasing out 2 positions as the term of office for the people presently holding those 2 positions naturally expires.
So keep 5, get down to 4, then down to 3.
But she's assuming, as with the bylaws, that they're automatically being rotated.
You can't change that article once it's in there, can you? You can't change the basic wording of the article. We should amend it, right? Or we could amend the article
Right.
just to elect 3 officers next year. For 1 year, and 2 year, and 3 year term.
The rotation will automatically kick in.
Right.
Yep.
Make sense? We just have to do that simple. That article, that's all. Does that make sense, Philip? Just keep
Which
it.
is, that's the simplest way to do it.
Okay. We'll do it. Do we need to, can we vote on that?
Amending the article. Yeah, probably have a- yes, I know.
Which article? Which, that?
Just read it. Okay.
The article, it's actually Article 45, to see if the town will vote to decrease the size of the elected planning board from 5 members to 3, with a reduction being accomplished over the next 2 years by phasing out 2 positions as the term of office for the people presently holding these 2 positions naturally expires. Well, how did we word the article last year for just to road commission?
Just to
Does
extend
that,
its term.
Does that define how that rotation is gonna be? Who's gonna be 3, 2, 1?
That particular article, that way, that's not.
No, that's what we have to, well, we just have to amend it to elect
3 members.
3 members.
1, 2, and 3 years.
1, 2, and 3 years, starting next year. And then it would be rotated just like the selectmen and like the assessors and. Okay, so we've got to amend that article at town meeting. We can't really amend it here, can we? No. We just have to amend that. To see if the town will vote to elect a planning board consisting of 3 members, which will have a 1-year, a 2-year, and a 3-year term starting in 2015. Make sense? Vote on it. To see if the town will vote to decrease the size of the elected planning board from 5 members to 3, with the reduction coming at the 2015 town meeting. And members will be voted on in 1, 2, and 3-year terms. Unless you think the opposite. You just gotta remember to do it at the town But we can't change it, the town has to
No,
change it.
no.
So, I don't think we should do anything. Next item, Reads Across America meeting and Gilbert information.
Received a packet of information today from Charlie Gilbert. I didn't copy it for you because it's marked confidential. Didn't know what your pleasure was on that, if you wanted to come in and read it. I did not want to make that determination. You don't have to make public something this, and I thought that you should probably decide how you wanted to handle it. So I can either make copies for you or not, or you can
Make
come in and
copies
read
and
it.
pick 'em up. I say we make copies and pick them up,
Right.
so we can each read them before the next meeting. No communication in there when he and the other attorney can get together again?
No,
No.
no.
So we've got to find that out, so.
Right, he hasn't mentioned that yet. He did say that this is a draft, and he's still continuing to work on it,
So
but
he
he wanted to
wants-
make sure he was going in the direction that you gentlemen,
So we
We're
got to make
hoping.
some input to that, so
Right.
take it home and read it, I'd say.
Yep.
Make sure he's done what we asked him to.
I may not be around when and if that meeting takes place, but there is one thing I'd like to suggest, is that, and I'm sure Charlie would probably think of it, once this building has been conveyed, they will put an insurance upon it, but we want to make sure that each and every item that the town has in this building has tenant's insurance covering that.
Right.
that would be up to the town
Mm,
more so
yeah.
than...
We'd have to have renter's insurance, just like they have renter's insurance. Makes sense. Okay. Inland fisheries training?
Yes, there is another 2 days. I took the registration training for ATVs, snowmobiles. Licenses is a 2-day training as well, which I had never taken, and I didn't expect they'd have another one so soon. I've been here for 2.5 years, and they've not had one in the area. And now there's one in Bangor, April 3rd and 4th, so it's a Thursday and a Friday. The office would only have to be closed that one day so that I could take that. I do not understand why it will take 2 whole days for that, but that's what inland fisheries is. So I wanted to know if that would be all right for me to attend that.
When is that date again?
April 3rd and 4th.
I make a motion that the administrative assistant attend the April 3rd and 4th inland fisheries training in Bangor.
Second.
Been moved and seconded to do so. All those in favor? Any in favor? Any opposed? Next item is the freedom of access complaint. The complainant, I believe, has received the same paper that we have, that the office received. It basically comes out and says that Town of Columbia Falls has complied with the freedom of access request. Any questions? No?
Yes, I have a question. Back in the last selectmen's meeting in December of 2012, I made the suggestion that we ought to come up with a committee to plan and raise monies for the 150th birthday celebration of the town. A committee was appointed, am I safe to say that? And we had a meeting. At that meeting, there was a number of people, and the question was asked, how are we going to raise monies? Where are we going to get the monies that we need? And Pete Dokes was sitting here somewhere, and Pete had a couple of suggestions. One was the Recreation Committee has a lot, I think I'm safe to say, a lot of money on hand. And all you've got to do is approach them, and I'm sure that they will help. Well, I did just that. I made that approach. I was told, hands off, stay away from it. And considering I had a full plate in front of me with a 150th celebration, I did just that, and I forgot all about it. Until 2 weeks ago tonight. I sat here for quite a while listening to Lenny before I figured out what was going on. And finally it dawned on me. And I've been thinking about it ever since. Where did that money go? If there was all kinds of money on hand, and Pete said, I know because I was a past chairman. I guess I'm going to make a motion that the selectmen authorize Machias Savings Bank to search their archives, finding out about the recreation committees or committee or whatever there was or is, and what monies they have or did have, and if they no longer have it, where's it going?
The passbook pages would be available to you to show that there was never, ever a great deal of money in that account.
That's one account.
Right.
I'd like to search them all. I've made a motion.
I'll second that motion.
It's been moved and seconded to direct Machias Savings Bank to search their archives for things pertaining to Columbia Falls Recreation Committee. All those in favor? 2 in favor, 1 opposed. Are you going to go to Machias Savings Bank and ask them to do that?
Again, if you'd like to
Okay.
authorize me to do it.
I don't see any problem with that.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
how far back do you propose to do this? I mean, I'm just saying, and I don't know, but if in 1910 the town had a recreational committee, I mean, how far back are you going? That's all I'm asking. And how much money are you willing to put into this?
Seems as if they ought to get a paper trail without too much difficulty from its inception. When was it created?
That I don't know.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I think I could add something to that.
Okay.
In the year 2010, the summer of 2010, after we had moved the town office up to this building, Muriel Smith was away, and as I usually did in those absences, I picked up the mail at the post office, brought it up to Joyce, and gave it to her, and she then, we sorted the mail out. I took the several envelopes from Machias Savings Bank, which would naturally come to the treasurer. And so I took those, went into my office and opened them, and one of those statements was a statement with the heading Town of Columbia Falls Recreation Committee. And I just glanced at the statement because I had not, in my time as treasurer, I had not seen such a statement before. And I glanced at it enough to my thought was that I would
when Muriel came back, I would ask her about it. And so I put it in my top drawer of my desk. But I did see that there was a number of thousands of dollars in that account. I would say, well, it was under $10,000, probably 9-something, 8-something, I don't remember exactly. When Muriel came back, I took the statement, into her one morning and asked her about that. And she snatched the statement from my hand and she said, that's none of your business. And I said, well, if it is Town of Columbia Falls account and I'm treasurer, then it is my business. I remember that very clearly. Now, at that point, I had other things that were on my plate as treasurer, and so I didn't pursue that. And Muriel kept the slip, and I never saw any other accounting of it.
I have a question, John. Did you bring that to the selectmen?
I did not, and I most likely should have. But as I say, there were other things that I was trying to pursue at that point, and I didn't. But rightly, I most likely should have.
If that is in fact the case, then Charter Savings Bank should have copies of those, I would think.
So I guess I wouldn't, the reason I spoke up was because of what Mr. Farnsworth said, and I guess I would suggest that if you went back to the year 2010,
Prior to 2010.
you might find what you were looking for, possibly.
Okay. Any other problem? Copier is the next item.
It was brought up at the budget meeting that our copier is in desperate need of something. We've had a terrible time getting the books printed. And it's desperate. It's really time. We've wasted too much paper. Sometimes it will print a half a sheet. Sometimes it's printing weird colors. I received a quote from the person that we currently have our copier from, and then the next day we had somebody stop in who used to do business with the town office, and they gave a quote for a couple of choices. Buy outright. We could do a $57 a month lease, which would include all of the copies that we need to do. They have brand new. They have a refurbished one, which was 2 years old with a 5-year guarantee. That's a much better machine than we have. So we have a couple of options, but it's something that needs to be thought about and considered.
What is the remanufactured?
What is it?
Yes, and how much is it?
It's $57 a month,
Oh, okay.
and that was
That's
this one. This one, the $57 a month refurbished one, you could make books with it. So of course that automatically picks up my ears.
Is it the lease one?
That's the lease one, and that's the refurbished one.
What do they just lease it until it goes to hell and they swap out the new one?
Either swap it out or till you don't do
Whatever.
your lease any longer. It was guaranteed for 5 years. It covers all of your toner and
all we
for
have to
small
do is
service, you
supply
have
paper.
service cost, but we have one no matter, we have pay a service cost on the one we have now. But now we buy our own toner.
How long a lease do you have to have everything?
That I'm not positive of.
Your toner's $57 a month.
It could be, yeah.
Yeah.
The new one?
It was $57 a month too. Isn't that a coincidence?
Does that basically?
That was a much simpler machine. It was very similar to the one that we have. They both make a lot more copies than we currently have. Faster copies, I mean.
Lenny showed me a piece of paper that originally was white before she put it in the copier. It came out completely yellow. I would say probably the toner really got depleted, but
And then we're finding, I can group a lot of things and copy them and back to back, but we're having to look at them page by page because you don't know, you can't trust what it's doing. So it is definitely, I wish we'd done this a month ago. It would have made
Looks like this.
our lives much easier, but
no, is this the one that,
that would be the new one.
but this does everything.
That does everything, but
And the
puts
same
your
price.
sucker in.
I think it will that
Well,
one.
this one has toner too, right?
They both
They
do.
both
They
do,
both would have
okay.
tone, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes a used car will stand up longer than a new car. Is that right?
Yes, better deal.
And make a motion on it? I make the motion that we get the one that will do everything.
So the second-hand one, basically.
Right.
Yeah. Second it.
Been moved and seconded to lease a remanufactured copier. Huge toner, but we still have to pay service, just like we do now.
You pay a one-year contract, just like we do now. And then the contract is the same price as what we pay now.
Been moved and seconded, all those in favor? 3 in favor, none opposed. Next item is library stipend.
It was approved to give Lois a library stipend. Because it happened, it started in the 1st of January, there was no account for it. You gentlemen decided to take it from buildings and grounds, but with a new town meeting coming, wondering if that's where you still would like that stipend to come, or if you would like it to come from somewhere else.
How much does the stipend amount to in a year?
$3 a day or a week? A week.
What are your thoughts, Bill?
Administration? And what's it gonna amount?
Well, it would make sense to come out of the library.
156.
I mean, they're asking for money for the library. If that's for the library, that's what it should come out of, shouldn't it?
I suppose.
Library?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Should come from
Well,
the library fund, rather than come from...
Speaking of the library, while we're on that account, for you people that haven't been in lately, you ought to go in. I was in Saturday, and you wouldn't believe what she has in there for materials. I won't buy a book for another 10 years. And I read constantly. She has Ken Follett, David Baldacci, 2 of my favorite authors, and many others.
Where should we take that money from? Should it come from the library itself?
Sure, that sounds good to me.
I make a motion that the library stipend come from the library budget.
Second it.
Been moved and seconded to take the library stipend for the librarian from the library budget. All those in favor? 3 in favor, none opposed. Any other old business? Speak up. New business. Nothing under new business. Anything that you guys can think of?
Yeah, I don't have anything.
Okay. We'll move on to offices and committees. Tony Santiago, Union Hall.
There was no meeting held last week. The town books that we agreed to pass out, I will pick them up Thursday from Nancy, bring them to my house, where we'll, and the list that Nancy will give us to provide, and Bun's gonna help us, and we'll set up a schedule, who's gonna take which route and that. There was some discussion last meeting about the inserts from MMA, and I have no way of getting them. I know the copy thing is broken, and if somebody in the community wants to step up and copy some of those off and deliver them to my house, I would love to put them in the books. We could do that all in the same evening, so. If we don't get them, then we'll just deliver the books like we said we would. Thank you to you three selectmen for coming down to the Union Hall on your Saturday morning. One at 7, one at 7:30, and one at 8 o'clock. The committee would like to move ahead with the bid process that you have. And if you have any questions on that, I would answer those tonight. But again, I'd like to get that moved ahead, so that'll require a vote from you. And the next meeting will be Thursday, the 13th, 6 o'clock at my house. All are invited.
I'd like to say that I was impressed with the work. It really looks good.
Thank you. Thank you, Rick.
Do you have any general idea what that's going to cost, Tony? No.
I really don't, I mean, I don't. Yeah. Yeah, good question, Jay, but I wouldn't even, my guess would probably be so far out of the box it wouldn't be fun. And that's all it would be, is a guess. Good question.
Do I hear a motion?
Put the bids out.
And, excuse me, along with that, the three people that received the bids for the initial work on those walls, is that the same ones that you wanted to go to again? And if not, who else would you like to add to that list?
And you got the wall there, drywall in it, and plumbing, and
Wiring, plumbing, sheet rock, you name it, building a house, basically.
And
right.
what do you have for a sum of money right now?
We have 12,000
For the,
town-raised funds set aside, and we have asked for 5,000 for this time in the budget, for the town meeting, warrant article for the town meeting.
So you'll get these bids back in a couple of weeks or 3 weeks? Or
I will, if you approve this tonight, I will deliver those tomorrow, and I would put a date on getting them back before the next selectmen's meeting.
sorry.
the last time bids went out, there was some concern that some contractors were left out.
Well, the one thing I want to say is you want to make sure it really is a contractor and not just somebody with a hammer and a nail. You want to make sure it's got to be a true contractor.
Will be in charge of getting the other subs, the plumbers, and that
Yes,
sort of
yes,
thing, yeah.
right,
Generally
right,
gonna-
right. Correct.
And we are going to try to keep it in town.
Yes.
Anybody have any problems with putting it out to the three that it was put out to before?
Can I make one suggestion, or one comment, however you wanna take it? I plan on bidding on it. Whether I get it or not, I don't know. But I'm gonna ask you gentlemen right now, if I put a bid in and I'm the only one, I'd like to have Alan work with me, as I said before. And if there's just one, I would appreciate it if he wouldn't vote. And if the other two want to award it, that's fine. But I don't think you ought to take food out of somebody's mouth this day and age. And I know he don't think that he's getting skinny. But, you know, I just think it's common sense. no more than I think it was right that you fellas had to go in there at separate times. That's all I gotta say.
I agree with you. I think that is ridiculous that selectmen can't sit down and have a cup of coffee and talk.
I agree, 100%, but if one person questions that, or has a problem with that, I know, it doesn't matter to me. I think it's kind of sad that you can't go in there 3 at a time and check out a building.
Well, I mean, I think you gentlemen, or whomever the board consists, I shouldn't say gentlemen because it may be a lady next time, but I think the select people ought to be able to have a working meeting. I'm not, you know, to work on different things, I mean, but anyway.
And especially leading up to the process of negotiating for this building. All three of us came in here not knowing what the other one's thinking, not having the opportunity to discuss it among ourselves.
It doesn't look like a very
That's
united board when you do that.
That's a disadvantage.
We were close to being in trouble because Alan was coming down the steps on the Saturday morning as Jay was coming
No,
up
he
the
was
steps.
actually
So we
still
were,
in there.
we were borderline in trouble.
I need a motion on,
Oh, yes, putting it out. Yep.
I'll make the motion that we have Tony put those bids out.
Second. I'll deliver those tomorrow then.
been moved and seconded to, put those bids out. All those in favor?
To the 3 contractors,
To the 3 contractors that bid on it before. All those in favor? 2 in favor with 1 abstention. Thank you, Tony.
You're welcome.
I'm not sure if this would be the right time to do it or not, but I would just like to say thank you to Mr. Ward for the past 3 years. I think you've done a fine job, and it's been a pleasure to work with you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
as the chairman of the, as the chairman of the Union Hall Committee, as the chairman of the Union Hall Committee, I would also like to add that it's been a pleasure to work with Bun and all the committees that you and I have worked together on. I'll miss our rides up to Calais and stuff like that, but it was a pleasure to work with you. You're a gentleman, and I look forward to working with you in the future on other things, and I'll always have your favorite drink ready at the house whenever you want one.
We'll move on to citizens. John Tibbetts.
It would only take a moment of your time. Did you get a copy of the paper that I left on off?
Yes, in the notes, and behind your minutes.
My only purpose in bringing this up again is simply because I believe the voting laws are important, and I believe the town of Columbia Falls ought to follow them. And basically, residence is a necessary thing in order to vote in a town. A person must have a residence, a place where they live, where they carry on their lives. They can be absent from that residence temporarily, as we all are. But it's necessary for a person to live in the town, and when a person is away from has no residence in the town, and is away from town for 8 years, or 10 years, or 20 years, they can't be considered a resident. And all I'm asking is that the voting list be looked at and adjusted accordingly. And that is a duty of the registrars, I'm sure Nancy knows. And, so that's all I have to say. Thank you.
I have, again, done hours and hours and hours of research on this. Somebody can come in and register with me if they have something that shows Columbia Falls as their residence. If they were in Portland, what's that?
Has to have a mailing address on it.
Right, exactly.
Not a P.O. box.
I know that, yes. And if they have one on it, then that's, if somebody went to Portland to register, they'd take that in, and it would be accepted. Voter statement also counts. I've done a great deal of research over the past 2 weeks when I would have preferred to have been working on the book, and I do find one person that after being a Columbia Falls resident for 79 years, I have to tell him he can't be. 79 years he's chosen Columbia Falls. He's never jumped around, he's never moved, he's never voted anywhere else. But now I have to tell him he can't be. Everybody else that I've looked into, I feel very confident as registrar to state that they are that they're all right to vote. And if anybody feels otherwise, then at town meeting they'll have to challenge their vote and start the hearing process.
Okay. Tony has a question.
Did I just hear a man that's lived here for 79 years is not going to be able to vote?
He's considered Columbia Falls his residence for 79 years. He worked away or worked out of town, would come back, and for 79 years he's called Columbia Falls home.
Sorry to hear that.
And I have to be the one to tell him he can't anymore.
And
It's my job.
he came to vote?
He comes here to vote at presidential
So
elections,
it seems so that...
gubernatorial election, which his one vote still counts no matter where. If we start looking around, there are people that live in Columbia Falls that call Columbia their home. We have people that's now changed to Millbridge, that they live in Columbia Falls. They have their own reasons for doing that, whether it be right or wrong. They pick one place, that's where they stay. But I do feel very comfortable in the people that I've researched, that I have the documentation. That doesn't mean there isn't somebody that's overlooked, and that person, they'll have to be challenged. They still get to vote at town meeting. I don't begin that hearing process until after. But they'll still get to vote, and the only time it's an issue is if it's a close vote.
How is it challenged?
There's voter challenge papers that somebody can look through the voter list, decide that somebody's not a register. They have to fill a form and sign their name and challenge that
Starts
voter.
out with the moderator.
What's that?
Goes through the moderator first. Has to go through the moderator.
Well, and I have the voter challenge papers.
So that challenge takes place right at that meeting?
No.
It can only take place at the meeting through the moderator.
Through the moderator?
Through the moderator. Nobody else can come up with it. It's got to be, the moderator has to initiate it. Somebody speaks to the moderator and then he...
And then it's only an issue if it's a close vote.
Mr. Chairman, could I just ask a question?
Yes.
And I didn't quite understand what Nancy was saying, that if someone lives in Columbia or lives in Millbridge, they may still consider this to be their residence?
Evidently, their towns have not challenged them. The towns that they're living in now,
Oh, you mean they moved to,
they've changed their residency. They own homes in other towns.
they don't own a home here?
Yes, they do. And they've lived here. But they've also have a residence and have lived in another town, or part-time, or whether they've really lived. Unless you've sat outside of their home and watched them, I guess we really wouldn't know who does live in a home at what times. And I'm not, as a registrar, that's not one of my jobs. So So it's up to those towns to challenge, not for us, because they've registered somewhere else and they won't be voting here.
If I might say one more thing, Mr. Chairman, I am sorry to hear the issue being brought once again, as it so often is, and I'm not objecting to what Nancy just said. I don't agree, but I'm not objecting, obviously. But so often when anything is challenged or spoken about in the town of Columbia Falls, as it was with the freedom of access complaint, it is brought down to a poor person who has been hurt by this, as it was for the 79-year-old person. And I believe I know who you are speaking about, Nancy. And I know that person well, and probably there was never a finer person born or brought up in the town of Columbia Falls than that gentleman. But the law is the law, and I wasn't picking on any particular person, but I was speaking of a legal issue, and I just hate to see it brought down to the unfortunate occurrence of a 79-year-old person being told that they no longer can vote here. I don't like that any better than anyone in this room does, but I am a firm believer that things must be run as the law dictates that we have to do it, like it or not. There are a lot of things that I don't like that the law forces us to do, but I don't feel that we can say, well, we're just a little town, so we can do things illegally if we want to. I don't believe that.
Well,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I sent her an email, Becky Steele, I sent it to MMA, and it come back from her. And it's all in the public record, it's right here. So if anybody wants to look at it, I'm not going to read it. Those are the questions that John asked. And there's an answer on all of it. Yeah. That was the question.
Okay, who did that go to?
That went to MMA, and it was answered back by Becky Steele. She's the legal advisor.
Thank you, John. Anything else?
Mr. Chairman? I'm sorry, I missed the
Yes.
office for a second. Just want to let you know, I got a hold of the fire marshal, and we have to put an application in for the dance hall permit for Union Hall, so that'll be $117. We're going to have to put in for the application, and we'll go ahead and do that.
Okay.
And probably be another month or so before we get there.
Okay. Having nothing else, we're open to a meeting to adjourn until Monday, March 24th.
Would you like to make that your last motion? Second.
Been moved and seconded to adjourn until Monday, March 24th, 2014. All in favor?
Yeah.